Hi, today we're going to be reading chapter 15, Straw, Straw, Straw. I hope that you've been enjoying Rump so far. I woke to the sound of horses braying and geese honking. When I opened my eyes, I found I was in a dangerous position. A horse's rear end loomed right above my head. People shouted back and forth, opening stalls, grabbing buckets and ropes. Someone came to my stall and removed the horse, which was a great relief. But then another person came and stuck a pitchfork into the pile of straw, narrowly missing my eye. I squeaked and quickly covered my mouth. The servant muttered something about rats and left. I didn't know what to do. If I walked out of the stables, would someone stop me? Were they still searching for the thief from the night before? I decided that it would be better for me to stay still until things were quiet, maybe until dark even, and then I could go home. I waited. I counted bits of straw, guessed how much gold it could all make. I wished for food. I wasn't used to being hungry for very long anymore, since I had been trading the miller for food whenever I wanted. I was so hungry, I sucked on bits of straw, and then I was dying of thirst. My mouth was hot and woolly, so I drank from the horse's trough again. It's difficult to tell how much time is really passing when you're hungry and bored. They say that a minute is a minute, no matter where you are or what you're doing, but my brain could never grasp that. I think that time is a trickster. When I have a lot to do, time shrinks, but when I want something over with, it stretches and yawns and laughs at my torture. Sometimes the minutes hold hours inside of them. This was one of those times. I fidgeted and worried. I wondered what had happened to Opal. Had the king come for the gold? Would Opal go home then? Finally, the setting sun, reddish orange, was filtering through the stable. The stable was loud and busy again, with servants unsaddling horses, feeding and brushing them. They all chattered idle gossip loudly. I was bored by what seemed so interesting to them. Lord so-and-so is to marry Lady such-and-such. A maid spilled a glass of wine on somebody. Baron something or another is raving again about trolls in the eastern woods. Come help me with the straw. The king wants it all in the west tower. A pitchfork plunged into my pile of straw. What for? We just put new straw in the beds. Don't know. He wanted a pile of it in there last night. And now he wants all the straw from the stables up in the west tower, every last bit. Their pitchforks jabbed into the straw one after the other, and I had to shift and twitch so I wouldn't be stabbed. Is the king weaving baskets? The servants all laughed. They filled a cart full of straw and left. Luckily, they didn't notice my head sticking above the rest of the pile. I hid behind some large piles until it was dark and quiet. I was shaking. I couldn't go home, not now that I knew Opal was still in trouble. Oh, I almost wished I hadn't overheard them talking. But why was I surprised? Why hadn't I thought of this? Last night was merely a test. Of course, King Barf would order more straw, all the straw he had, and make Opal spin him more gold. But even then, would he be satisfied? Would he ever stop demanding more? I didn't want to answer those questions about the future. I had to think about now. Opal was still in trouble, and it was more my fault than ever. I couldn't just leave her. It was back up in the tower for me. When I plopped through the window this time, Opal seemed expectant. Oh, I knew you would come, Robert. Robert? It's Rump, I said. Oh, never mind that. I know Frederick and Bruno call you silly names, but I won't. I shall call you Robert, a proper name. She smiled as if that were the kindest thing in the world, but I couldn't smile back. I was gazing open-mouthed at all the straw. There was three times as much straw as before, all piled along the walls and halfway up to the ceiling. Troll's breath, I muttered. Oh, it's not so bad, is it? Said Opal. You can spin this in a wink. You're so clever. I felt ill and must have looked at Opal's eyes brimmed with tears and her chin quivered as she spoke. You must. The king says if every last straw isn't gold by morning, I'm going to die. They're going to kill me. And she wailed, though I didn't think it was quite as sincere as the night before. There wasn't any snot, but sincere or not, what choice did I have? What will you give me? I asked. Opal folded her lower lip down so that she looked like a large toddler on the verge of a tantrum. I already gave you my necklace. That was made of pure gold. You half-wit. Do you realize how much that's worth? That was for last night. You have to give me something for tonight, and besides, I'm making you a mountain of pure gold, I said impatiently. Who is the half-wit here? Opal looked around desperately. It made me nervous to watch her think. She looked so blank and mystified. She brushed her hand down her hair, licked her lips again, fiddled with her dress, and finally fumbled with her fingers. I will give you my ring, she said as she pulled a little ring off her finger. It was not gold or silver, probably cheap tin, but it had a small stone in the middle, shiny, white with swirls of purple and blue and opal. My mother gave it to me, she said, before she died. She dropped it in my hand, and I felt a stab of guilt. I didn't think there was anything she could give or promise me that would be worth more than a hulking pile of gold, but I could see this was probably close, a priceless token. I was starting to really dislike the whole binding bargains and promising thing. Still, it wasn't anything horrible. Close the windows, I said, and started to spin. My limbs still ached from the previous night's work. My leg pulsed with pain every time it pushed down on the trundle, but I kept going. Whiz, whiz, whiz. Gold, gold, and more gold. I had searched for it my entire life, and here it was, pouring out like water. I hated the sight of it. Opal fell asleep. Faster this time. One hand twined in the gold, the other clutching some straw. As the first rays of morning light reached the sky, I grasped the straws from her hand and spun them too. The gold was piled all around me now, and to me it just looked like the heaps of shiny straw. I didn't see why people loved it so much. Just as I was descending the tower, the door unlatched, and King Barf said in his nasally drawl, "Ah, my sweet girl, you are a treasure beyond compare." My fingers were stiff and sore, my legs was cramped, and my back and head ached. Climbing down the tower was agony, but all I could think of was going home. Home and food. My stomach rumbled as I touched the ground, but then I heard another rumbling. It was growing louder, and it was definitely not my stomach. I stood in the middle of the castle grounds, not bothering to hide myself. I couldn't move, and I couldn't speak, even though my mouth hung wide and my tongue wagged. I started to drool. A procession of wagons rolled through the gates and up to the doors of the castle. 1, 2, 3, more than a dozen cottage-sized wagons. Wagons stacked high with straw. I sat against a tree and watched as the servants unloaded the straw, bundled it up, and hauled it inside. With each bundle they carried in, I felt weight pressing down on me, heavy as gold. I had a hard time breathing, and I realized what should have been obvious to me from the beginning. This was my destiny, to spin gold at the whims of a greedy king for the rest of my life. I thought that when you found your destiny, you were supposed to be happy about it. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was something you just had to accept, succumb to. Hadn't I seen the villagers on the mountain succumb to their fate all my life? They accepted it because they had always known their name and their destiny that came with it. And they knew those things couldn't be changed. Maybe I just needed to accept what was in front of me. I felt very heavy and sleepy. There was so much spinning to do. I should go right back to Opal now, but I needed to close my eyes just for a little while. I moved in the direction of the stables, but someone stopped me. "Ho there, boy! Where are you going?" "To the stables," I said sleepily. I didn't care what he thought. "Not now, lad. We've got work to do." And he dropped a bundle of straw at my feet. "Take it inside and follow the rest." I looked up and saw a procession of people carrying straw on their backs into the castle. With a deep breath, I swung the straw onto my back. My knees buckled under the weight. I followed the line into the castle, up some stairs, and into a chamber. We must have been in a different tower because this room was 3 times the size of the last one. The straw was piling up in the corners and crawling up the walls, covering the tapestries, the paintings, and the windows. This would never stop. As long as there was straw in the kingdom, King Barf would want it spun into gold. I fell helplessly into the straw and buried myself under it. No one noticed me as the workers piled straw higher and higher until it covered the windows and all the light was shut out. That's chapter 15. If you'd like to continue reading with me, I will be reading chapter 16 in another video. Hope you're enjoying